Energy Holdings CEO Don Gillispie is joining us now. He has 4 decades and then some, 45 years or so, right?
I started when I was 5. So.
So you started really young. You're a genius at such a young age. Of course, an expert in nuclear power business and even works at a nuclear power plant nearly identical to this one that is facing so many problems in Japan. So you're joining us this morning to comment on this unfolding situation. Maybe put it in some layman's terms for a lot of us. I think
I'll do my best.
Okay.
Essentially, thoughts and prayers go out to the Japanese people, of course, and every time we have a chance to say that, we need to say it because it's horrific what's happened. I've never seen anything in my lifetime like this. The good news, this is not Chernobyl. This plant has a containment, it has cooling systems, it has safety systems, so we're not looking at a Chernobyl event. We are looking at radiation levels that have increased, in part because of Unit 2. The Japanese, quite frankly, lost cooling to Unit 2 for a period of time, I believe yesterday, and that increased radiation levels. The good news that I heard this morning, the radiation levels actually starting to drop down this morning.
And when you're speaking radiation, just to interrupt, we're talking low levels.
Low levels.
I heard
these are
maybe
low levels,
equivalent of a month of sun exposure or something like that.
These are levels that if you stood at the boundary of the plant for long periods of time, you may get a dose, again, not a life-threatening dose, but a dose that would be higher than you get elsewhere. That's the good news. And every day that goes by, these things cool. They cool and get lower and lower in the sense of heat production, which contributes to the need to fuel more water, release more radiation by opening and releasing the relief valves. The good news is, like I said, this is not a major threat. We have the low-level detection systems around the world. We can detect the smallest increase in radiation. So we're detecting this stuff everywhere. People are saying, oh my gosh, but really we've had that ability for quite some time. The equipment is so sophisticated. So it's just above background. Anything above background we can pick up. So people are hearing that, but when you look at the big picture, the Japanese are getting this under control. Hindsight being 2020, they could have invited in international help sooner and helped control this. They didn't. They have now, and the fire, by the way, has been put out on Unit 4.
Well, and that was one of my other questions. I know we hear all these talk to these explosions and things happening, and some people are saying, oh, that's radiation that is just being, sent out into the air.
No.
But it has to do with hydrogen.
Yeah.
It's more smoke as opposed to radiation,
hydrogen went up into the upper part of the secondary containment and exploded, and we saw those explosions. It did not explode in the primary containment. On Unit 2, there's some question of whether there is a leak in the primary containment. Right now, I don't have any evidence to say there is or isn't, and it seems nobody else is reporting it either. There's some speculation there may be, if there's one at all.
And what is your reaction to everything that's going on right now in the media? This is really getting a ton of attention. There's talk of radiation to the West Coast. Well, what do you have to say on that?
Well, the levels we're talking about, again, are not life-threatening in any way, shape, or form. I think that the interesting part is how the media will start talking about this event, and in the same reporting, it will talk about the larger death toll. It's almost kind of mixing apples and oranges. And it's a little misleading to people because they transition into that in the same story. And the story starts out, reactor in danger or meltdown. There's not a meltdown. There's indeed...
that word has been thrown around a lot.
Meltdown is when the fuel fuses together, and down means it goes down through the core of the reactor and out the bottom, and then there's a huge problem. Melting fuel is when it fuses together like it did at 3 Mile Island into one mass. What I think has happened there is that we've had fuel damage, no doubt, hydration, which releases the hydrogen, which caused the explosion, and it also releases primarily 2 isotopes, iodine and cesium, given iodine tablets to prevent the absorption of it. So these are 2 isotopes that are not as threatening as, say, plutonium or something. So in the standpoint of release, that was released in Chernobyl. It's a very, very bad isotope. So that's not happening here. Not that this is out of the woods yet. I think it is because each day, as it cools the reactor, and there's less to be concerned about. From a standpoint of impact on the rest of the world, I do not think there will be impact on the rest of the world. I don't think, and based on the evacuation, which was very precautionary and smart, I don't think anybody, the Japanese, will be actually in the exposure either. There will be clouds of this stuff going around. It will be detected, and people say, oh my gosh. But you look at the levels that they're detecting, they're pretty low, and they're not going to threaten anybody.
All right. Speaking of global, we do need to head to break quickly, but we're going to have Don stay with us. And speaking of global impact, especially on new nuclear power plants, we want to get to that, of course, because your involvement and your leadership at AEHI.
Exactly. How that's going to impact your company potentially, and your concerns with that. But we do have to go to break, so do stay with us again. More with Don Gillispie right back.